This week on Behind the Pulpit, we are happy and privileged to welcome Drew Huber onto our podcast today. Drew serves as a Stephen ministry leader here at Millington Baptist Church, and he used to be in the Navy.
So we would go on sea trials when we would put the boat to the test. We would take it, we would call it angles and dangles. We would go like 10 degrees up, 10 degrees down, 20 degrees up, 20 degrees down. We were doing these angles and we did 10 degrees, and I laid down on the floor and just slid from one end of the engine room, like halfway through the engine room. And this officer that was he was brand new on board, and he said, "Oh, that looked like so much fun. Can I try it?" And I was like, "Sure." And we did a 30-degree angle, and he flew.
We will, of course, recommend a book for you, probably more than one by the time the episode is over, and we keep you up to date with a couple of controversial news stories that are happening in the world today.
If a student who's 14 years old wanted to pursue something like this, specifically gender transitioning, they no longer in New Jersey would have to consent with their parents to work on this issue with a mental health professional, which is a little bit young.
And of course, we will dive into Pastor Bob's sermon on the end of Luke chapter 10 and the beginning of Luke chapter 11. And of course, we will wrap it all up with a Theology Sprint.
Martha.
Wherever you may be watching or listening to this today, we hope you're having a wonderful day. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's edition of Behind the Pulpit.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Dave Henschel here on our Behind the Pulpit podcast, and I'm here with my colleague, Bob Erbig. Good to see you today, Bob. How are you?
I am here, Pastor Dave. I'm hanging out. I got my setup over here. I'm ready to go. You know
Awesome.
what? It is, and you know what? It's March 4th, which I learned this morning that
It's the only day that's a command.
the only day of the year that's a command. March 4th, and we're gonna have a military guy on the show today.
Yeah, a special
And-
veteran
and-
is with us today.
I also prepared because it's March, so I got my St. Patrick's Day, my shirt on here.
Very good.
Costco
All right.
did me right.
Bob, you're not the host of the show today. Do you mind if you give me back the steering
You
wheel?
can have-
All right. So we're here with a veteran in the United States Navy. Why don't you introduce yourself to
March
us today?
4th, Drew.
I'm Drew Huber. I think in most circles, I'm better known as Peter Pendel's son-in-law.
You looked uncomfortable as you said that.
Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Amy Huber's husband. That one I like.
We had Amy on a couple weeks ago to talk about her
And
ministry.
I made the bold claim that this one will be a higher viewership than that one.
Giddy up, folks.
You mean the Underground? That's like our highest podcast ever in history.
I know.
I think we're like at 600 people, so we'll see.
That's
We don't stand a chance, but I'm trying.
I'm going to check now.
That's the greatest podcast episode in the history of this YouTube channel.
We have to have a follow-up because they might be going up to
in
the
terms
Supreme
of
Court.
viewership and listenership.
All right.
Tim, you're hurt.
So, Drew,
you're
you got a
hurting my
high
feelings,
bar
man.
here, man.
Listen, man. Everyone, go right now. If Team Drew, share it with all your friends. Get them to watch it.
Good to have you with us today, Drew. Tell us
Thank you.
about your ministry involvement at Millington Baptist Church.
Right now, I'm involved in the Stephen ministry. I'm one of the Stephen leaders with you and a couple other people on the team. And I don't know. I've been doing that for a year and a half, 2 years almost.
Awesome.
Coming up on 2 years, I guess.
I'm going to ask you more about that. So we'll look forward to hearing about what's going on and what God's doing in Stephen ministry. It's very exciting. And we got a full show for you, and we're looking forward to kicking it off. First, we will talk about some announcements and body life events
Let's do some announcements
that are coming
now.
up in the life of our church.
Boom.
All right. So the first one.
And then there's going to be a quiz. We're going to hear if Drew...
Okay.
Actually, what we should do is let's put a thing up there and see if Drew can tell us what it is, and then we'll find out how well we're doing with actually doing announcements.
Okay. Very good. So, Drew, there's an event this Saturday.
Yep,
and,
I'll be there.
It's called the what?
Yeah, the men's breakfast,
All right. What time, Drew?
8 a.m. till 9:30, I believe.
slide.
Yeah,
We're starting easy.
my
He's doing well.
wife signed me up for that one, so
Awesome.
I'll be there.
Men's breakfast. We're going to hear a powerful testimony.
Hold
from
on, I do have a question
Amit.
for Drew. Drew, on that pan, what is the most enticing piece of food?
Oh, bacon, obviously.
Okay, not the beans?
No. What are we in England here? Come on, it's the United States.
Those
See a
look like
bunch of
some-
men of beans on
sunny
a Saturday
side up
morning and
eggs.
see what happens.
Come on.
All right.
It's
So
an
we're looking forward to
English
men's
breakfast.
breakfast this Saturday. Guys, join us. It's going to be awesome. And speaking of men's events, in a couple weekends we have our men's conference coming up, Stand Courageous, Saturday, March 23rd. Please sign up online. It's from 8 to 4. And we'd love to take a group of guys.
I actually have
in
an
our
update on
shuttle.
signups that I was told to share on the podcast.
All right.
Apparently, you have to call to sign up.
Okay.
But so if you want to go to this amazing event, make sure you call. However, if you are interested in taking the shuttle, the sign up will be at the men's breakfast.
Awesome. Yeah. You can just come to the breakfast and sign up. We'll have a good old-fashioned piece of paper for you to put your name there. So it's going to be a great event. And try to stay awake here, Bob. We're doing a podcast. All right. So
It's a rough night, man.
that's coming up in the life of our church. And then we have our Easter festivities, the hair-raising egg party Saturday,
All right. I see you got something in front of you there,
March
Pastor
30th.
Dave.
And I was doing announcements yesterday
highlight.
at the service, and I totally forgot. Rachel had asked me to not only ask people to sign up to volunteer for the hair-raising egg party, but she
Fail.
also said, could you also please remind people to bring candy? And so this is my reminder. Rachel literally came over to the podcast studio and handed me this bag so that I wouldn't forget again.
There it is.
So please donate candy. You can drop it off
Did
at the
she
church.
say you could open it up and share it with
what I
everybody
thought
else
it
on
was
the
for.
podcast?
She did not indicate that, so
Man,
well,
I can if you want me to. There's some Kit Kats in there, which I know Bob is.
This is not
very
airing live, so
interested
she
in.
won't know. So why don't we do it?
Is
Well,
that? But is that?
We
is that
don't
meant
try to
for
eat on the
egg party?
podcast. Remember, Bob, it's a rule. All right, so candy,
we can eat while the
individually-
camera's not on us.
individually wrapped candy. So please bring it. Please donate. We have a wonderful ministry event coming up. So hair raising egg party. It's going to be great. Come 10 o'clock, 9:30 a.m. VIP hour. So that is the announcements. And
My
now
goodness.
we are coming to that part of the show where we recommend
Dun, dun,
a
dun.
book.
We could. You know what? I want to ask
Candy
you
puts to
today.
the side.
Since you're driving the ship, I want you. Could you give me, like, if we had a theme song for this section of the show, what would it be, and could you hum it?
Yeah, probably the alphabet song.
Jeopardy theme song.
The
yeah.
Jeopardy theme song.
More like the Game of Thrones theme song.
Yeah,
I don't know what that is.
Something.
Took it to another level there.
I think we need a fight song between you and me.
The Rocky song.
Our,
Bum,
our book.
bum, bum, bum,
Yeah.
bum, bum,
So today,
bum, bum.
Sopranos. Woke
in
up
our
this morning, got a
famous
new
book war, I have a classic book on the spiritual life written by the great Jonathan Edwards, the greatest philosophical mind ever to be produced in the United States of America.
President of Princeton University.
He was the president of Princeton University.
Good New Jersey guy.
And he wrote a tremendous treatise on what is the true signs of you being a Christian. So in this book, which I just tore to shreds many, many years ago, he's got 12... Bob, would you please stop yawning into the microphone? He's got 12 signs that you are... See, this book is not very exciting to Bob, but it is exciting to me. 12 signs that you are not necessarily a Christian, and then 12 signs, distinguishing signs that are truly and gracious signs of holy affections that God has done a work in your heart. This is a wonderful book. It's a classic. This is the one I read, although since then I've gotten the official Jonathan Edwards.
Oh, I see. So you
set.
worked in two books, but they're the same
It's
book.
the same book. Yeah. This is the fancy Yale Press edition, which is wonderful, beautiful to read. Just hold that in your hands, man. Just feel like...
What does it smell like, Drew?
Don't you want to like bring that to the
Give it a
park
whiff.
bench and like read that thing? It's just
smell like old
Doesn't
book?
have it. No.
If you're looking for a classic,
Not
Religious Affections, every single Christian should read Religious Affections at one point in their life. So there you go. There's my book recommendation
Good.
for today.
I was doing an interview in your office the other day and noticed that there's a whole couple of shelves devoted to Jonathan Edwards.
Yes.
It's like a
If-
little man crush going on there. it
If the
seems
church is on fire, I'm grabbing my Edwards set, man.
Have you ever
Yeah,
been to his grave in Princeton?
I have.
Mm-hmm.
I
It's
did.
quite the experience.
Yeah. It's one of those rectangular boxes that sits above the ground. And so it's a very intriguing marker, not too far away from some other famous Princetonians. But Jonathan Edwards, good New Jersey guy.
He is.
Of course, his church was up in Massachusetts, which I've also been there, where he preached the famous Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God sermon, as well as many other sermons, and got run out of that church because of his
Orthodoxy.
stance on
Wow.
certain items. But this is what happens to preachers sometimes.
That's
So
sometimes.
my days
It's
here
only
might be
about
limited.
it's
Man.
Yeah.
amount of time. By the way, did we want Drew to talk about the Stephen ministry?
Yeah, so
After?
Drew, let's talk about
Do I get
that.
to do this? I'll save this for later.
Yeah, we'll do it in a sermon, right?
All right, sounds good.
So what is Stephen Ministry, first of all?
Boy, I should memorize the statement of what Stephen Ministry is, but the way I always describe it is we are an extension of the pastors. So the pastors don't have time. You guys don't have time to visit, to spend extended amounts of times with people that are hurting in the congregation. And
I don't know what you're talking about, Bob. I got tons of time. Like
So much time.
Free time is like not a problem.
I don't know what to do with myself.
I should say you don't have enough
What are you
time
doing today?
to meet
Nothing?
with everybody.
Actually, I had a guy come up to me yesterday before I preached. He goes, "Oh, so you're working today, right?"
Just Sundays.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
It's the one day of the week.
Appreciate that.
Inverted.
My wife, the pastor's daughter, made that joke
Yeah,
towards you
yeah,
that you
yeah.
only work one day a week. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. I didn't know she had
She
it
should
in her.
know better.
Yeah, really.
Amy,
Yeah,
watch it.
come
All right. So anyway, Stephen
Just gave him the
Ministry.
finger.
Yeah, so we step
that
in
kind of
is
finger.
we step in somewhere between a counselor and a pastor, and we kind of bridge that gap. You as the pastors don't have time to counsel people on an extended basis, and counselors don't have the spiritual side. Most of them don't have the spiritual side to that they can bring to somebody, and so we kind of bridge that gap. We're not counselors and we're not pastors, but we kind of help to facilitate the in between, I would say.
Yeah. So why did you
Does
get
that make
involved?
sense?
How come the Lord tugged on your heart and
Yeah.
kind of drew you into that role? What was intriguing
Part
to
of
you
the
there?
pun.
Yeah.
Drew was you drew
I
him
know,
in.
right? Yeah.
I'm going to draw Drew.
I don't know, to be honest. I was kind of not serving anywhere, and I just wanted I knew where I wasn't going to be, like different ministries and stuff, but I didn't know where the Lord wanted me. And so I was kind of lost, and honestly, and just trying to figure out where to serve. And Carrie Isler came and asked me, she said, you would be, she
You got to
said,
try to keep him awake, man. You want some candy?
You know what? I didn't get enough coffee this morning, so I'm
okay.
sorry.
There
Maybe
you
you
go.
can. Well, you know what? I'm not a Marine, so I can't have that.
that's Navy. So I didn't know where I wanted to be, or where the Lord wanted me to be is probably more accurate. And so Carrie Isler actually said, I think you would be good at Stephen Ministry. And my initial thought was like, no way, I don't want to do that. And but as I prayed about it, I felt like the Lord was kind of leading me there. And I think I came up to you on a Sunday morning. You were driving out of the parking lot. And I was like, hey, Pastor Dave, I just have a quick question. Like, could you pray and, let's see if the Lord is leading you to think that maybe Stephen Ministry would be good for me? And you said, I don't need to pray. You'd be great for it.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
like, man,
Is it
I just
true?
felt
Did
so
you
good.
corroborate
I do
this?
recall
yeah,
this.
you actually did do that. And that was, I mean, I could cry thinking about it now. It was such a blessing to hear something like that, like that somebody believed that was a place for me to serve. And so it was awesome.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
thanks
so
for
thank
stepping
you
up
for
to the
that.
plate. Then you became a Stephen minister, and
Yes.
then we coaxed you into becoming a Stephen
Stephen
leader.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a hierarchy, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
So is he at the pinnacle right
you're
now?
now at the top of the food chain.
Yeah,
There it
I'm
is.
at the bottom of the pinnacle,
Okay.
probably. I'm
Yeah.
the new guy on the block, but yeah.
So tell us about the upcoming events in Stephen Ministry.
Well, we're hoping soon. I mean, I think in the next couple of weeks to start another training session for new Stephen ministers. So that's a 20-week. Well, I shouldn't say 20 weeks. It's 50 hours of training that we usually divide into 20 sessions, so 20 weeks usually. We're trying to find a way to kind of condense that a little bit so that it doesn't go into the summer months. So.
If you're interested, there's
Yeah.
still a little time. You can sneak in
Yeah.
and be part of the next training. We'd love to talk to you if you're interested in serving as a Stephen minister.
Absolutely.
Drew
yeah.
would love to talk you into it.
Yeah. Yeah. Convince you. Yeah.
Awesome. So good. Thank
Didn't
you. For
you
your
also did a
service.
short class in the fall? Did you mention
We
that
did.
before?
Yeah. We did one of the books that we go
Are
through.
we going to do that again? Is that another on-ramp for people?
I'd like to. Yeah. There's no plan of that right now, but I would like to do another book that we do as so what it was is one of the books that we do as Stephen minister as a part of our training. We did a class on that in the fall, this past fall, and just did a Sunday school class, but we actually condensed it into like 4 weeks, which I mean that's fast. So we didn't explore it as in as much depth as we probably could have, and that was the one feedback from the class was like we would like it to be longer to kind of dig in a little bit more. So yeah, I'd like to do another class like that. That was fun. And
Yeah. Good.
I think it was rewarding for people.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you for serving in that way. So we look forward to what the Lord's going to continue to do in Stephen ministry.
Yeah, me too.
And we've now come to that part of our show where we talk about what's happening in the news. Pastor Bob, there's a lot going on in the news.
This is the scariest part of the show for me because I don't watch the news, so I'm afraid of
Well, it's good for you. That's why you should watch our show to let you know about the most important
there you go.
issues that are happening.
Yeah. So there's a couple stories that I wanted to highlight.
You had some things that kind of rankled your mind over there, so
yeah.
See if I can corroborate.
Yeah, the first one is not quite all the way through the legal process in New Jersey, but actually your dear wife, Amy, was sharing with me some concerning legislation that's going up to the New Jersey State Senate, which will, well, let me just read the headline. It says this: 14-year-old children will be able to consent to mental health and emotional disorder counseling without parent knowledge. And so specifically what this has to do with is gender transitioning. So if a student who's 14 years old wanted to pursue something like this, they no longer in New Jersey would have to consent with their parents to work on this issue with a mental health professional, which is a little bit young to make a kind of drastic life decision like that. So that's
14, nah. Ready to retire.
I don't know if it mentions in the article, but the initial law or the initial bringing of that law was 13, I believe, and they changed it to 14 to kind of.
Wow.
I don't know. You got teenagers. What's the difference between 13 and 14?
It's a pretty big difference.
Large maturity jump.
But still, it's still too young.
So we're going to be talking about this in an upcoming event at Millington Baptist Church a little bit in terms of
maybe not the legislation piece,
gender
but certainly
dysphoria, the issue of transgender, and Christopher Yuan will be coming and discussing the LGBTQ plus spectrum. And so how do we think about that from a Christian worldview? We would encourage you to attend that event and get informed. So that's coming up. Did you want to share about your resource now, or you want to wait till the sermon to share about that?
Let me share when we get to the sermon. Yeah, because it has to do with the tie-in was prayer. So let me, when I get there,
Okay, cool.
Let me do it
so
there.
Stay tuned. That's a little bit of an appetite teaser for that. So that's happening in the news. It's a concerning thing in our state, so pay attention to that. Get involved. Call your congressperson and.
Well, it's not just in the state. So I have another one. This is from Breakpoint. Their headline is Indiana's Child Services takes child from parents. Now, Indiana, certainly not by and large, a liberal state, is also having things happen there. And the subtext was another case of a teen taken from a home over pronoun usage. So I think the larger issue here is that this is a continued erosion of parental rights. That you as a parent are secondary or subservient to the state when it comes to raising your kid, and that issue is going to continue to be an issue as we go forward. And it's very concerning, the different legislations that are happening. My kids are still young, but when you get into the teenage realm, this is going to be major.
Yeah,
and I think it is something we should oppose.
Yeah. There's a great book on this by Abigail Schreier called Irreversible Damage, which talks about the idea that we're allowing young people to make drastic, life-changing, irreversible decisions that other countries are now starting to walk back and say this is too young. We need to hold back on allowing this kind of thing. So
also, the kind of the thesis of that book too is she talks about is this a contagion? You have a bunch of teenagers and all of a sudden somebody else does this, and some people don't like that term. Mark Yarhouse, who we've had here before, he had a book on the gender identity stuff, and instead of the social contagion, he used the term the looping effect. So if your friend does that, then it starts to catch on, and it's loops and loops and loops, and I think a contagion is not a bad word for it.
Yeah.
So people struggle with it, but it's maybe more overly stated than it actually is.
Yeah. I had a parent come up to me yesterday in the foyer saying, do you think my teenagers should come to the underground sessions with Christopher Yuan? I said, how old? And I think they said 14. I'm like, Yeah, they're ready for this event.
Yeah.
So they're hearing about it.
According
I think
to the
that's
state
relevant.
of New Jersey, they're old enough
Well,
to
you
make
know,
that decision.
do they even need to ask their parent to come in?
That's true.
Yeah, they're just gonna show
Actually,
up.
on the fall retreat,
Yeah.
my the high school boys had a really interesting discussion about a lot of this, and I told them all to sign up for the underground sessions. I think a lot
There
of them
you
are
go.
going to come because it was a.
Mhm.
Drew, I don't know if Austin told you about that conversation.
no.
All right, well, ask him
He
about
was
it
pretty
later.
tired last night.
He's older than 14, though, so he doesn't have to tell you.
He is. Yeah. 16, actually. Just turned 16.
Yeah, we had a good conversation
Yeah.
about some of that, and I told them all to sign up. So I think they are going to come and check that out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Why is it, so maybe just quickly before we move on, why is it a Christian worldview issue? And I think the Bible very specifically talks about God making us in the image of God, male and female, and also the family is the centerpiece of society too. So these are issues that touch both of those topics, which is why it would be concerning that the state is pushing in that direction.
Yeah. It intersects with the foundational text of Genesis 1, Genesis
Mhm.
2,
Yep.
the goodness of gender, how that's reflective of the image of God. It
Mhm.
also intersects with the holiness code in the law.
Right.
So there are passages that speak about God's people refraining from appearing as the other gender, more of like a cross-dressing kind of passage.
Right.
And then if you've ever heard Rosaria Butterfield talk about this, she actually pulls from the 10th commandment about covetousness. And she says
I
at
see.
the root
Interesting.
of this issue is a deep sense of covetousness that needs to be rooted out.
Would she
as
pull
a
in
sinful proclivity.
the bearing false witness too? Like the whole idea of not lying? Does she use that as well, or?
Certainly, I think when it comes to the demand to force others to use certain pronouns that you're not comfortable doing that are not true for you, I think that would be relevant there. So, but yeah, perhaps there's a lot of different biblical worldview intersections with this. Yeah,
There are. We should do a teaching series on that, Pastor
We
Dave.
should.
There we go.
I mean, fundamentally, it's you're changing who God created you to be.
Mhm.
Or you have a desire to change who God created you to be. I mean,
Right.
that's like,
right. Pretty foundational.
yeah, that goes, like you said, right back to Genesis.
Yeah. So that's that news story. We hope that you're aware of that. We want you to be aware of that. The second news story that caught my attention this week was from a medical journal. So this is from the JAHA.
In your spare time, you're reading from medical journals.
Well, I just read the abstract.
Abstracts from the New England Journal of Medicine.
Yeah.
Cliff notes.
This is from the Journal of the American Heart Association. JAHA, I think, is the, JAMA. This is JAHA. So
Jaha and Jama. Okay.
the title of this particular study, or this article, there was an association of cannabis use with cardiovascular outcomes among U.S. adults. So I'm just going to skip all the way down to the conclusion of the study. They said this: cannabis use is associated with adverse cardiovascular outcomes, with heavier use, more days per month, associated with higher odds of adverse outcomes. So a lot of times you'll hear this idea that the use of cannabis has no medical side effects and that it's totally safe and that it's not going to harm you at all. But actually the data does not bear that out. There is some pretty significant risks with constantly pursuing cannabis in that way. So we would just issue that warning, and the medical journals are starting
So
to
is
back
the
up
bottom
that
line
data.
saying that if you smoke pot, your heart will feel it?
It is. Right.
Okay.
So
Not good for your heart.
be careful about that.
Man.
Like that's putting in the same category as like eating fatty foods.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of other reasons besides heart issues that we think you should avoid cannabis use,
Yes, to be clear.
but that's one of them. The
Physical
Millington
heart
Baptist
issues.
Church Elder Board actually put together a position paper on the recreational use of marijuana a couple of years ago. We can share that with you if you're interested. It lists out a bunch of reasons from a Christian worldview perspective on why pursuing cannabis in that way would be problematic for you spiritually. And so just a warning. I saw that in a journal that's in the news. So be aware of that. And we hope that you'll pursue sobriety and be alert and pursue your spiritual life with God without the need to pursue inebriation and develop a dependency on cannabis use. So
All right, fine.
sorry, Drew.
To be clear, that was a joke.
This is a no fun
Don't smoke.
podcast. So
There it
yeah,
is.
all right. So there's some in the news stories. Was there a third story, or that was it? Just those.
I think we're good there. We'll
Okay,
go
good.
with the law and cannabis.
Very good.
And stealing kids from parents.
That's right.
great.
With all due respect, if you do have an issue with substance use and you'd like to work on that, we do come from a very gracious perspective. We would love to offer you help and resources, and we can refer you to counselors who can help set you free from that. We believe that the gospel will be very powerful in that way. All right, so we're on to that part of our program where we talk about the sermon. So, Pastor Bob, you were preaching yesterday.
Something like that.
All right, here's my challenge for you.
All right.
60 seconds or less. Summarize your sermon.
Are you going to time me?
Yep. Ready, set,
right.
go.
All right, so we came to the end of Luke chapter 10. We looked at verses 38 to chapter 11, verse 13. The theme was distraction and prayer, and that was how I wed together what happened at the end of Luke chapter 10 to the beginning of Luke chapter 13. The end of Luke chapter 10, we looked at Mary and Martha and how Martha was distracted by the things of this world and service and not sitting at Jesus' feet. And then that set up Jesus' discussion about prayer when the disciples come to him and say, Lord, teach us to pray. And he goes through his version of the Lord's Prayer and then gives a couple parables after that on how we should ask and what the approach we should ask with and the expectations we should ask with. So the big challenge was how can we ask with audacity and remove distractions from our prayer life? How about that? How'd I do? 43 seconds.
Wow.
Boom.
Well done.
Pretty impressive. Can you get the camera on that? That's record time there, Pastor Bob.
The sermon was about 45 minutes, so if you want the longer version, expounded on those
I had to have self-control not to distract you during your sermon.
Pastor Dave I did get a couple comments on you calling and texting me in the middle of the sermon yesterday.
Who was that calling you and texting you? Man, that was rude.
I know. What's the matter with you?
Did people know it was me?
Well, it said Dave Henschel.
It did?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we didn't
you hear
know
that?
until...
Oh, you didn't hear it?
No.
Oh,
You
okay.
said it. You did say it.
Well,
then,
my
that it
phone
was
does
Dave.
say, call from Dave Henschel. I thought you guys would have
Oh,
heard
I didn't
it.
catch
Okay.
that. But you did say after that it was Pastor Dave. So.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just thankful that I'm saved in your phone as my real name. So thank you for not giving me some kind of stage name or pet name or nickname or my annoying co-pastor's calling again
There
or
you
something
go.
like that. So I appreciate that.
I knew a guy that had somebody in his phone as "Do not answer, do not answer."
Thank you for not naming
Fair
me
enough.
Do Not Answer.
There you go.
Bob. So,
There you go.
Drew, you got a chance to hear the message yesterday, yes?
Yeah,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Overall impressions from your perspective of that sermon or that passage? What stuck out to you?
Well, I thought it was great. I told you it was
Yeah,
great.
thanks.
It was a great
Thanks.
sermon. So much in there. That was my one complaint. It was too much.
Ah.
There was so much that you had in there. It was hard to kind of boil that down. I was impressed actually that you boiled it down
I
to
did it
40,
right there. There you go.
43 seconds or whatever. So, yeah, it was convicting. I felt like, one of the things that you said in there was the, what's your motivation behind serving? What's your motivation behind
Yeah.
church things and all of that? So I thought that part especially was great. I didn't know that this was called the disciples' prayer.
Yeah, there's a debate about that, but yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was cool. And what was that word you used that you had to give us the definition?
Impudence.
Yeah, impudence.
With the I debated
See,
whether
you're the one
using,
throwing out new vocabulary words.
I
that
did.
was my...
Well, that was the ESV. I debated using the a different version because it kind of explains. It's always the difference. If you're using a version and you have to explain the word, that takes time to explain the word.
Mhm.
You could choose a different version that kind of explains it a little quicker, and I don't have to go through it. But yes, impudence, or asking with shameless boldness, is what the Greek term means.
Yeah.
Wow.
The idea of coming with boldness in prayer, with audacity,
Yeah.
as you're asking.
Yeah, I love that part of it too, with the coming with audacity, just boldly asking.
Yeah.
I actually did have a question. I don't know, that you just skipped over, or you kind of didn't dig into the whole hallowed be your name part of it as part of the model of starting with worship, sort of, or putting God in his place and you in your place and then praying. I wondered about that.
Well, yeah, so I think that the pattern is they start with our Father, which is an indication of intimacy and relationship.
Mhm.
And then the hallowed be your name is this idea that God is set apart, that he's holy, and so you should approach God as such.
Yeah.
He's holy, he's unique, he's worthy of worship.
Yeah.
And then you want to pray that his kingdom is coming to earth, that you can be an agent of that. So once you know who you're approaching and how you should approach him, then you make the requests.
Mhm.
I think I did something else on prayer, I think in November with the Nehemiah series.
9.
We talked a little bit about how
yeah.
you make the requests, because sometimes I think our tendency is to go and run right to requests and not set the stage before we make the request. And the Lord's Prayer helps us to see that, or the disciples' prayer helps us to see that in the pattern.
Yeah, you didn't dig into that as much. But, not that it was necessarily had to be, but it was...
Well, you just told me I said too much, so...
Good point.
That's why we save it here,
Yeah, right.
So good question.
His
Nice.
cup runneth over.
That's right.
Yeah. So, Pastor Bob, I was kind of intrigued by the Martha story. Why are we so tempted to be like Martha?
I don't know. You're the one that told me you're a Martha, so maybe you can... Martha? I told Tim the title
I
for
wasn't
the episode
prepared
should be
for everybody to
Martha,
know about
Martha,
that.
Martha.
Good old Brady Bunch reference, man. That's old
So
school.
I think the temptation to be like Martha is, and I'm the same way too. A lot of it is that I think we live in a performance-driven society where we really think that we need to have everything together. And I'm the same. Like if I have somebody over to my house and I got laundry everywhere and the house is not looking great and there's dust, it's not clean, the dishes are not done, like there's a little bit of embarrassment. And I think the question the passage forced me to ask is, why is it that I care so much about that? Is it more about me, or is it really about the other person? Like, so what's my motivation in actually engaging in that clean? Is it to try and clean myself up rather than just come to the feet of Jesus, or is it really serving out of a selfless, not expecting anything? I think the point of the story is to say that I think she was looking for something from Jesus and from Mary, otherwise she wouldn't have been so annoyed with them.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting part of that story, though, is that Jesus did not reprimand her or anything until she asked the question.
Right.
Like she wasn't, there's no indication that she was doing anything wrong. It's just that when she brought that question to Jesus, the motivation behind what she was doing was revealed.
Right. So doesn't the question that she's bringing to them reveal the heart posture behind what she, like if somebody's just serving, that's great. But the fact that she's coming and saying, why isn't she helping me? Why aren't you saying anything?
Yeah.
Like that kind of changes it a bit, right?
Yeah,
Like you're
right.
saying.
Yeah.
You had mentioned the other day about the drama triangle, the Cartman drama. Stephen Cartman was a famous psychologist in the 60s who developed this drama triangle piece. And you had Martha playing, I guess, the victim role, and then Mary's the perpetrator, like giving her all the work, right? Why are you letting her like victimize me? And then Jesus is the rescuer. So she's creating this drama triangle in the Gospel of Luke.
She's coming up and trying to
Did
draw.
that make it into the sermon, or was that?
I took it out.
On the
was
chopping
too much,
block?
but I kind of said basically she's trying to pull Jesus into her, whatever the family dynamic was, the family drama. Clearly, there's something going on. She's annoyed that Mary's
I don't
not
think
helping
that was
her.
the first time that
Probably not
little
the first time
spat
she
broke
was
out.
Not the first time she was giving Mary dirty looks. And now, hey, Jesus is here. Jesus, hey, help me out here.
Yeah, settle this for us.
Yes.
Finally, somebody sees what Mary's doing. He's going to make it right.
And of course, notice he doesn't. He says, "I'm not going to do that." He graciously talks to Martha and says, "You're anxious and troubled." Mary's sitting at my feet, and that's the good portion, right?
Did you talk about that word portion in your message?
A little bit,
and
yeah.
the Old Testament background to that?
A little bit. I did cite Psalm 119:57, which talks about the Lord being our portion, So, but that's about all I had time to kind of go into for that word study.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I wanted to chase that down. I didn't have time either. But how they divided the land by the 12 tribes, but Levi didn't.
Oh,
get,
yeah. So you mentioned
any
that,
land.
Yeah.
And he says Levi won't have a certain allotment because the Lord is his portion. I was wondering if it was the same word.
That's a great question.
Jesus is the portion that was given to the Levites.
Yeah. Well, now I'm intrigued. I gotta go look it up.
If you're watching, chase it down for us. Let us know Septuagint usage of portion and compared to Luke chapter.
Go
10.
ask ChatGPT and see what it comes up with.
Yeah, that'd be good. Good.
What's
So
the
then
word study
you were
of portion?
talking about the Lord's Prayer, and I was a little taken back because I think most people have memorized the Lord's Prayer from Matthew,
Right.
and
Yes.
the one that you were. And, like I said, when we did the Sermon on the Plain, I think Jesus taught so many different times and so many different occasions. There was different ways he would say things. But the one in Luke 11 was phrased a little differently. And the Lord's Prayer took on a different form there.
Yeah.
So what was different about it, and what stuck out to you about that version of the Lord's Prayer that was unique?
It's a different. It's not as long as Matthew. I think the pattern is still there by and large. So one of the commentators was
similar structure,
right?
overall.
So one of the commentators was saying, I don't think these are the same scenes. So Matthew brings up Jesus is offering this in the Sermon on the Mount as a teaching, whereas here the impetus for Jesus saying this was the disciples coming up and asking him a question, teach us to pray, and he teaches them in this intimate setting this kind of shorter version of the prayer. So maybe he was boiling it down as I did with my my sermon recap just a second ago.
This wasn't before the Sermon on the Mount, though, was it?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly. So it's hard to know exactly if it was before or after. It's kind of speculation, but it's not the same scene, you know.
No.
So, yeah. Does that answer your question in terms of what you're getting at, or do you want more?
It's interesting. And so he does this teaching on prayer, and then you talked about praying the pattern. And I was wondering, how can we avoid Jesus's other commands elsewhere, where he's like, in the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying, don't be praying like with these vain repetitions and just thinking that if you just keep praying the same words over and over and over again, that God will hear you because of that. And I think sometimes the Lord's Prayer can become that for some people, and it's just rote and it's not really meaningful and it's not substantive. So how do we avoid obeying the exhortation to pray the pattern, but then not letting it become sort of like this legalistic, structural, non-substantive, vain repetition? Yeah.
Well, I'll answer that. Let me first say I forgot I had my commentary here, and one of the things I forgot to mention is that I think in the Matthew 6:13 there is a textual variant there, the doxology at the end, which is not included in the Luke's prayer. So there's some debate about what's to be included and what's not to be included. Let your kingdom come.
Yeah, most people will say that was probably not original, but that they used the Lord's Prayer as a liturgical prayer formula, and then the church added the doxological ending for yours is the kingdom, the power, the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Right.
So, but most versions will just end with deliver us from the evil one.
Yeah.
So different prayers.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about the pattern thing?
All right, so the pattern, here's where it's helpful for me. I think the pattern is good, and I think it's certainly, I grew up memorizing the Lord's Prayer. I don't know if you didn't grow up in a liturgical church, which, to be honest, we don't do that on a regular basis, and maybe we should.
Although you had us say it at the end.
I had to say it at the end, right? But I grew up every single week. You did the Lord's Prayer, you did the Apostles' Creed. So I learned it through the liturgical
So did you
background.
do the one where it was forgive us our sins or forgive us our debts or forgive us our trespasses?
I grew up with
Which
debts.
one was yours?
I grew up with debts, and then later on, for some reason, they changed it to sins, but never trespasses. And I will say that every time...
Were you a trespass guy or a debt guy or a sin guy?
I think I remember being trespasses.
Yeah.
I always remember going to other churches and hearing them recited, and they would say trespasses, and I was always ahead of them because
you were the
debts, trespasses. I was weird by that.
Okay, trespasses. Whatever you guys do here,
but I
think you guys trespass. I developed debt. We're both sinners.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I think the thing that was helpful for me as I got older, I think it's helpful to pray the prayer and then pause, and then you can extemporaneously pray the heart behind what's going on in the pattern. Father, hallowed be your name, Lord. May you get the glory. And you can pray something that's more
pause, and use it as a springboard.
Right. And then, of course, there's an opportunity for confession of sin and for praying for others, intercession and protection. Lord, would you protect us? I pray against these things that are going on. Mm-hmm. So I think you can use it in that way. But the order and the pattern is what's really important, as well as the words. I think the words of Jesus that are worth praying. So,
Do you use any other prayer guides or books, either one of you guys, Drew or Bob, to help you with your prayer life to keep it fresh?
The Psalms for me.
Yeah,
I pray the Psalms. That's most often for me is I always seem to be able to connect with, especially I think the Psalms of David mostly, not exclusively, but mostly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's always the richest part of my prayer life is when I pray the Psalms.
You were telling me about that book you were reading by one of our world partners, Clint Watkins. I think he's got a lot of Psalms in there.
Mm-hmm.
that
He
he's
does,
using
yeah.
more like lament psalms.
Yeah, lament. Yeah. Yeah, I love that book. It's taken me a while to read it, but it's a great book. I mean, it's just
Not everybody
being-
reads as fast as Bob.
yeah, that's right. But being honest with God in prayer, that's. I mean that
Yeah.
I don't know that I
Yeah.
grew up thinking that, believing that, doing that. But the fact that the Lord can handle our emotions is just a whole different. I think I
Yeah.
learned that as an adult.
That's a helpful thing to know.
It's actually
Yeah.
something we talk a lot about in the Stephen ministry.
Yeah.
Like,
Very
stop
much.
covering up those emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's be real with them.
Yeah, and I learned a lot through Stephen Ministry of not being afraid of emotions. So like when people are experiencing emotion, people are sad with things that are going on, loss of a loved one and stuff. Like I don't shy away from that anymore. I dig into that. I'll just jump right in. Like let's talk about it. So
It's kind of an honor to bear witness to them experiencing
it is. Yeah, that's true.
What
Yeah.
about you? Any prayer books or prayer guides that help you?
I do. I've used various ones over the years. The one that I've really liked a lot over the last couple of years, and I discovered it right when I went on sabbatical, was a book called Be Thou My Vision by Jonathan Gibson, who's a professor at Westminster Seminary. And he actually has a few other ones. He's got one for Advent. He's got one that, like a post-Easter, the Pancha. Have you heard that? The Punch? There's like a liturgical term for like between Easter and Pentecost. Anyway, it walks you through every day kind of a pattern, a liturgy of adoration and meditation, and you read the law, so there's usually a reading from the Ten Commandments or from some piece in Scripture. Confession, assurance, Scripture passages for assurance. There is a Scripture reading that you do that day, and then there's a time for you to offer, petition and intercession for people. And it always ends with the Lord's Prayer. So I found that to be really helpful. There's been times in my life where I felt like I'm walking through a season where I don't have the words, and I've found it helpful to go through some of those prayer guides to help me kind of in that wake up phase that I was talking about at the end of the message yesterday. So I'd recommend that one if you're okay with that. For some people, it might feel too liturgical, but it's called Be Thou My Vision by Jonathan Gibson. And there's others, but I'll just mention that one.
Yeah.
So.
Just to be clear, it wasn't his day to recommend a book, but he did anyway.
Well,
So-
speaking of books, Pastor Dave, by the way, here we go.
yeah, how did these relate to your sermon? You brought
Well,
some
before I mention these, I will say I had somebody come up to me mentioning last week you were making fun of me with my stack of books for my Contagious Faith class.
Yes.
And she said, I need that list because I wasn't there that week. I will take it.
Tim, what am I supposed to do with this, man? He just
All right.
I went to Contagious Faith this week.
Oh, how was
Stan
it?
was leading. It was great.
Was he? Good.
Oh,
Stan's
man, he's
great.
great.
Stan and Debbie are great.
Stan is awesome.
Get up there and just gave it.
Yeah.
Truth-telling week, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preaching
That
the
was
gospel.
awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so the last point about asking with audacity, I'll mention two things. The first thing I will mention is that Luke is the gospel writer who also wrote Acts, and there's a heavy emphasis in his works on the Holy Spirit. So at the end of the parables, what does it say? The Father might give you a gift of the Holy Spirit. And so the first book I'll recommend is you're going to laugh at me. I read both these books this weekend.
this weekend.
Oh my gosh.
So here's how I've increased my reading speed. I do the audiobook, and I can do that when I'm doing anything. The best retention is if I'm doing the audiobook and reading at the same time. But
What speed do you listen?
two times.
We
two
got
time-
mooing
I-
from Tim over
Two,
there.
two
what I do.
times because I don't read that slow. If you listen to it
Two
on one
times.
times, I'm just like, come on, let's go.
Does it go any further?
No,
two
two times is the most you
I
can
do. I do
Yeah.
1.5.
Okay.
That's two. Two
Well,
is a little
it
wild.
depends on the person who's actually doing the audiobook. Sometimes 2 is too fast and 1.5 is
So
usually
Drew
enough.
and I were at a funeral this weekend, and the person who had passed away always read stuff on like 2 times, but he said sometimes he would read it on 3 times.
His podcast.
I didn't even know that was a
That was a
I
path.
think that was podcast. He would do
Really?
it 3 times the speed.
I never heard of it 3 times, but
I didn't know you could do that.
So one of his sons was
insane.
given a beautiful. Yeah, one of his sons was given this beautiful eulogy. He's like, my dad was like a voracious, learner, and he would listen to stuff at that speed, and he would try to convince his son to listen to it at that speed, and the son's like, I don't even know what this guy's saying. It's just so fast. But two times.
Sometimes 2 times, I'm like, this is just right. And then if I go back to 1, like how they actually read it, I'm like,
oh, man. It's like,
oh my gosh.
Wrap it up, man.
Come on.
Yeah.
I feel like that's
I
just
can't do 1 time.
that's just an
perfect
illusion.
speed
Thank
for
God
me.
for 2 times on YouTube now.
Well, like, for example, like I
How many
speak
people are you
fast.
listening to this on 2 times on YouTube? Type it in the comment. We want to know.
Christy
What
listens to
speed are
this
you
on
watching
2X.
the Behind the Pulpit content?
But
Christy,
I speak fast. If you listen to me on 2 times, it's no good. Like, but some
Christy
people, it's
listens
just
to
like
this.
it's just really plodding and slow, and like let's go.
Some people are super fast. Like Andy
Yeah.
Stanley's fast. Ben Shapiro's fast.
Yeah, you can't
if
listen
you
to
speed up those guys, you're gonna like.
Oh,
you're
Ben
gonna have,
Shapiro,
like, a
I
little-
don't think I'd be able to keep up with him.
Yeah,
if he-
No.
he's quick.
No.
Yeah.
All right, anyway, the book. So Greg Allison, professor at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, wrote a book called God Gift Guide, Knowing the Holy Spirit. This is an excellent book if you want to know more about the theology of the Holy Spirit right here. He had a great discussion about things like the baptism of the Spirit, where you find it in Scripture, and then the different spectrums on the gifts, and a lot of other things. He talked about some theological words I had forgotten about, the generation and procession of the Spirit from the Father, from the Father and the Son. The Spirit comes. So anyway, great book on the Holy Spirit. I would encourage you to pick that up. The second book was the book by Christopher Yuan called Out of the Far Country. So in 3 weeks, he and his mom are going to be here talking about this topic. This is his autobiography of how he came to the faith, and it is powerful. I was moved at the end, and I almost shared the ending story, because basically, if you're somebody who has a child who is a prodigal, who's left the Lord, and you've been praying for them. See, this is where the asking with audacity comes in. If you have been praying, like you've just given up praying for your son or your daughter or whoever, somebody who's walked away from the Lord. She came to faith, and she was praying for years and years and years and years, and the way that God worked in his life and her persistence and her and his father's too, persistence in prayer was just amazing. So I just want to read you the thing at the end where Christopher finally, I don't want to spoil everything, but he went through a tough time. Eventually, he came home after being out in the far country, which is a reference to Luke 15 that we're going to come to, and he walks in the door to his home. And this is, and his mom had put out all these yellow ribbons from all the people who had been praying for him to come to the Lord and to be redeemed. And this is what he, writes. He goes, I stepped into the entrance and looked around the front foyer, and I saw more than 100 yellow ribbons tacked here and there on the walls. I walked closer and saw each one had a signature and some words of encouragement. Each ribbon was signed by someone who has been praying for you all these years, my mother explained, and they wanted to personally welcome you home. See, he wasn't a Christian, and then he became a Christian.
Wow.
And he says, it was almost more than I could bear, that much love, that much perseverance, and that much grace extended by so many people, many of whom I had never met. And they didn't love me simply because of who I was. They loved me because they loved Jesus, and they, like my parents, were willing to give me a second chance.
Wow.
So, I mean, like, the story is so much more complicated than that, and it's just really powerful, but that's the end.
Wow.
And that's what I'm talking about, like this asking with audacity that you might have just given up. Pray, because God can do the impossible. And I think that's partly what Jesus is getting at when he's given those 2 parables after the pattern in Luke 11. So,
Wow.
How
That's a great
story.
picture.
How does that story land for you, Drew?
It just gave me chills. That's amazing.
yeah, I
And-
had times
and-
I was crying reading through this, like just the way the Lord working through his life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes me think of my 20s, and people were praying for me, and
Yeah.
you know, so that's amazing. That's really cool.
So maybe instead of the book war, we could just have like reading time with Pastor Bob, because that's so much more enjoyable.
Well, I will tell you, this is great on audiobook, so if you want to just listen to the audiobook, you can get that. They're obviously going to share the story, but if you want a bit more, you can pick up the book.
At whatever speed you're comfortable
At
with.
whatever speed.
Yeah.
If you want to listen at 1 time speed, God bless you, it's going to take you 3 times as long.
There's also half speed. Let's not forget that.
Oh my gosh.
The often
Slow it down.
neglected half speed.
I just want to say Pastor Bob's audiobook listening commentary is just an absolute illusion of today's society. Now he's speeded up. When it goes back down, he just can't deal with how slow it is. That's,
It is
I feel like
tr-
that's
it is
just
true.
society today.
I feel like I need to take in so much information.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for the good message and the good encouragement. Pray with audacity. We're looking forward to continuing our sermon series next week with the tail end of Luke chapter 11. And
What are you covering?
The passage about Beelzebul. So
No.
we're looking forward
Wow.
to a spiritual warfare section
There
of
it
the
is.
gospel according to Luke. And so here we go.
All right,
It's on.
buckle up.
What does Beelzebul mean? There's your question. There's your teaser. Look it up. Come prepared for next Sunday. All right. So we have come to that portion of our program,
Indeed.
ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of fast, we don't just read fast around here, right,
We
Tim?
fast.
Well, I think I know what you're going to say. We've been going a little slower.
That's true,
but that's okay.
but not half speed.
No, not that slow.
Okay. So it is time to Theology Sprint.
It is
So,
indeed.
Mr. Yukis, how would you like to play this section out, my friend?
I'm probably the normal way. I'm going to tell you guys the question. You guys will answer it.
That is kind of the normal way. Yeah.
All right.
Is there another way?
It would be for you guys to ask me a question and I answer it, but I don't know if
Next
the
week,
listeners
That
want that.
dude, that would be amazing.
Oh, man.
Let's
I-
see. Now
I
he
take
just
it back.
told himself.
That's
I think
true.
my kids would like that actually.
I like it. I
No
like
way.
it.
But
There is really only one hurdler in the room, and it's Tim. So we got to put him
Still
to
got
work.
it.
Yeah.
believe it or not.
Yeah.
All right. Today's question for you is, what are the implications of the story of Mary and Martha in the Bible for gender roles and expectations within Christianity, and how might interpretations of this narrative contribute to the ongoing debates about women's roles in the church and society?
I think I'm going to step out now. That's
Well,
okay.
I mean, we've been talking about covering this in
It's a
more in
good way to
depth.
get
It was
in
actually
trouble.
This
Austin's
really isn't-
question
well-
months ago.
Oh, this is his.
This
yeah.
was Austin's question.
That's right. He
Yeah,
did
I mean,
answer.
this isn't the right passage to talk about that from. And I don't think that's really the point of the passage. The passage itself is kind of talking about just kind of what is, and there was cultural expectations. But as far as it relates to church order and church leadership and home leadership, there's other passages that you would go to for that. 1 Timothy and 1 Peter 3 and Ephesians 5 are talking about different order in the church and as it relates to the home and the husband and the wife relationship. So that's too complicated for us to cover in 60 seconds. But I will say, though, I think one of the things that Martha does show us from a positive angle is that service is a good thing. We should desire to serve and be with Christ. And, again, Luke very much highlights women in his gospel. And so we see oftentimes women coming to him, Mary sitting at his feet and listening and giving us a model for pursuing him in the spiritual life and being his disciple. So I think that's something that very much should be emulated.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Once again, Mary in the story is a hero, and the hero of the story is a woman. And I think everywhere that Christianity has ever spread has always been
Right.
good for women. There are certain cultures where women are actually discouraged from spiritual and theological education. I think the Mary passage goes against that idea. And so I think that there's a certain amount of flourishing that's available in Christianity that isn't available in other worldviews. So I do think that those passages about women in leadership and women teaching deserve good, solid instruction. We are planning on that. So Pastor Bob and I are looking to do some teaching series, maybe a Teaching Tuesdays.
Yeah.
And we want to give that the proper amount of time rather than just a quick sprint on it. So look forward to that content. We want to dive into that topic and give it its due measure. So good question.
Yeah.
Boom.
Nice job, Austin.
Well, that wasn't his question. He had a similar
okay.
question.
Yeah,
That wasn't
What
his
about
question.
the
General.
submarine question you had for Drew before we go?
I can ask the internet for a submarine theology sprint really quick.
You want just a,
I think
you want just a
torpedo.
funny submarine
I
story?
think
or
the
something?
internet tried
Do
to
you
throw you guys a
you are a great
curveball, and
storyteller.
read
Do you
it.
have a good submarine story before we go?
We all live in the yellow
You
submarine.
told this one, Drew. I forget what the story was, but I remember back when I was in 7th grade when youth group was down here.
Yeah.
You told this one story when you were teaching about a submarine.
I don't know which one that was, but
It's
one
a
of
long
my
time ago.
favorites is that we used to when we would we would do two different times. We would go on sea trials where we would come out of a shipyard or something where we were repairing something, and we would put the boat to the test. You know, we would take it. We would call it angles and dangles. So we would we would go like 10 degrees up, 10 degrees down, 20 degrees up, 20 degrees down. And we would just like keep pushing harder and harder to see what the submarine could do and just make sure everything was okay. And so we would do that also if we would take people's dependents out. We call it the dependents cruise, and we would take friends and family out and show them what the boat could do.
Teach them to depend on the Lord.
So I was an enlisted person, and one of the officers was in the engine room where I worked, and there was this patch of like tile flooring in the engine room that we would wax to make it nice and shiny and neat and everything, but it was slippery. Like you could lay down on it and slide on it like a slide. So we were doing these angles, and we did 10 degrees, and I laid down on the floor and just slid from one end of the engine room, like halfway through the engine room. And this officer he was brand new on board, and he said, "Oh, that looked like so much fun. Can I try it?" And I was like, sure. I was like, just wait though. Just wait. We'll do it. Don't do it on this one. Do it on the next one, or, a couple from now. Okay. So I knew we were going to go from 10 degrees up to like 30 degrees, which a 30-degree slide on the sliding board would be dangerous. Like, they just wouldn't do it for kids,
Wow.
So we're doing 30 degrees, and I said, okay, lay down on the ground, get ready. And we did a 30-degree angle, and he flew through the engine room. It was as fast as anybody I've ever seen.
Caught some air.
Yeah. Hit at the end, like hurt his hip, and I was like, this isn't good, but it was pretty funny. Like but that guy, we called him Frenchie. He everybody that came on board had some sort of engineering degree, and his major was French. He learned French, so we called him Frenchie, and we used to give him a lot of grief. So that was Frenchie. If you're out there, I'm sorry.
All right, so don't go on any submarine cruises with Drew.
Yeah, I think we
Plays
tied
tricks
it
on you.
I think we taped him to his seat one time.
Okay.
What would a
different
submarine
stuff.
cruise look like?
Well,
Wow.
with
It's actually-
Drew,
blew my
it's a
mind.
dangerous
It's
thing.
actually really nice. They're like, when subs go underwater, there's no waves. It's very smooth, very calm. It's really nice.
Wow.
But the first time
Give it a try sometime.
the first time you go underway, be prepared, because it's like you hear all the creaks and the it's scary. The first time I went actually underwater, I was like, is that normal? Is that
Yeah.
okay? And like, you look around, everybody's like just acting normal. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I guess
Right.
it's normal. I guess it's normal.
These sounds.
Yeah, it was
Like-
really.
You're like, is it
It's
about to
freaky.
implode and I'm about to die?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They say if you tie a string from one side to the other, it sags like as
that
you go
right?
underway, because the pressure.
Big pressure, yeah.
you feel
okay.
the pressure in your ears and
Wow.
stuff. So yeah.
Drew, thank you for the stories, and thank
Sure.
you for your service
You're
in
welcome.
our military. Good to have you on the podcast today. Hopefully,
We'll have you back
you
for
enjoyed it.
Veterans
I did.
Day next year.
Yeah. No,
All right.
That's kind of weird, but okay.
Veterans
Pastor
Day.
Bob.
I mean, Memorial Day would be weird. Veterans Day.
That's true. Yeah.
Veterans Day.
That's another Behind the Pulpit in the books. Thank you, guys. It's been a good show. We hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you next time. God bless you.